So here's where the slave cylinder sits on the Jag. And you can see there's not a ton of space here to work with. There is a nut not only here, but one right above there. And then there's a hard line coming into it from the top side. And that hard line goes on up to this bracket right here, which there's the hose. That hose goes on up to, like I said, just underneath that intake manifold right there is where it connects. So I don't think I'm going to be able to actually film this stuff while I'm trying to take it off, because I can just barely get my hands up in there. So all you're going to see is my hands in the way, and you're not actually going to see me doing anything. So I am opting to take it apart right here at this joint. So you need to actually get a line wrench, proper line wrench there. And you actually need to hold the hose too. So you got to get two wrenches up in there like this, which is why I said you're just not going to be able to see anything while I'm doing it. All right, so now I got the slave cylinder off the car, and we got the new one sitting right here. Now we need to make sure, because you cannot actually get to this, it's so tight in the transmission tunnel, you really can't get to this very easily. So I need to transfer this over to here and make sure that this angle is correct and sitting in the right position, so that when I offer this one up to the car, it'll line up to the hose without putting stress on it. So the way I'm going to do that, got a little square here, and just measure it. Say, okay, from there to there, it's about 2 3/8 to this outer edge right here. So then I'll transfer this over to here and make sure that I can measure this and that it sits at 2 3/8. Once it's tight, then everything should line up just fine. And the other thing, my pin came in. This is actually the earlier style pin that uses a cotter pin through it, where this year car really should have had the one with the clip over it, but that one's currently not available, so this is what we're using. Now, since this did have a bolt going through it, you need to take a good look at the bushing in here, which actually the bushing didn't get tore up. Sometimes the threads of a bolt can really tear these things up sometimes. And I went and cleaned it, and we need to make sure that this actually fits in this properly, which it does, and it's not really super loose. So we're good to go there. So now I got my clutch pipe installed onto the slave cylinder, and I got my 2 3/8 inches from here to there. So that should be all good to go. And my clutch rod here, I got the homemade rod here. I got the jam nut on there. Now for initial adjustment, I'm going to start with where we was at before. I know that this broke off flush with the nut, so we'll just do that and adjust that right to be the same length as the nut, as the old rod. And then we can put all this together. Yes, I may go ahead and put some NICs before we finish this. And then when we get under there, we want to actually lubricate this a little bit with some grease lightly before we slide that in. So now I got to get all this stuff into the car. So before I actually install the slave cylinder, I got another issue to deal with. This hole here is stripped out. Looks like in the past, the stud here had some damaged threads here, and someone still just ran it in there and damaged all the threads. And when this thing first came out, it came out really easily, which I didn't think much of initially because it's a nylock. So I'm like, well, yeah, it just wasn't in there with enough. It wasn't like Loctited in or anything like that. So yeah, it'll come out, no big deal. But then I looked at it closer, and then there was aluminum all in the threads here. So
Yeah, so now it won't hold in there, so now I have to drill and tap it and put a helicoil in. But one of the issues we got is when you put this, which actually I've already started, is see that hits through the frame rail, so you can't actually get directly at it with a drill or with a tap handle, so I have to use just a ratcheting wrench to tap it out with, because the angles won't allow you to do it any other way. Yay, fun. So now to install the slave cylinder, I first started out by hooking up the line and getting the thread on here first so that I wouldn't cross thread it. And then put this in place and got, well, the stud wasn't in it, so then put the stud in it, because with the studs out, it's so much easier to do anyway. Now this bolt back here can be difficult to do, and if you got a really, really short setup, you know, like even this doesn't quite fit back there. Now I know there's a bunch of specialty stuff out nowadays that you can do that with, but I don't have some of that stuff. Also, some of these wrenches like this, if they're bent right, can help you get a better hold on it, but you're still, you know. But I just happen to have this wrench here that was custom bent by my father for some project years ago. Who knows what he was working on, but it just happened to fit on there really nice to be able to snug that thing down. Sometimes you got to get pretty creative to get in there and do it properly. So then we take the clutch rod, slide it in there, and push the cylinder in to collapse it down. Get that lined up, and then the pin itself, you want to make sure you grease it lightly, because that will help with smooth operation of the clutch and to help prevent wear. And you should always put the pin from the top down, so if you ever lose the clip or anything else, or the cotter pin or whatever's holding yours in on any vehicle, down, so that it'll stay in place more than likely. Because if you put it the other way and put the clip or pin on top, if the pin falls out, then the whole thing could slide out and you lose the pin. So we'll put a little, I'll probably go ahead and put a little washer here and then a cotter pin. Now I know I've had at least one comment of people wondering how I'm going to actually bleed the clutch on this thing. Now there are several ways you can do it. One of which is you can actually take a tube, connect it here, and force the fluid up. So you're pushing the bubbles up, which is the direction they naturally want to go in anyway. But what I'm going to actually do here is a method that I basically use to finish the bleeding of MGB clutches. But I'm going to start here by just opening this up. And you open this up and then let the fluid work its way down from the master cylinder, and it'll usually just dribble down slowly. And once you actually get fluid down here, then close this off, and then we can start bleeding. So now sometimes these things don't actually seem to want to come down and start dripping. And in that case, you can just go ahead and close this off, give the pedal a couple of pumps, maybe push down, hold for a second, let up, and then come back down and open it again. And that's what made this one work. And you can go and you can watch it until you see, like right here, we got some air coming out. The drips will, right there's air a bit more, and you just let this go until you don't see any more air dribbling out of it. And then we'll go to the next step. So then here's where we get into the way I was talking about bleeding it, so that you could do it at home without any special equipment like a vacuum bleeder or a pressure bleeder or anything like that. As you open up the bleeder, then you push it in until it bottoms out, and then close the bleeder, which it helps here to go ahead now to actually, oh, that was the right size, to actually tighten it. Now it's going to draw from the reservoir, or you can actually push on the pedal now, or have somebody press on the pedal to kind of push it out. Do that a couple times until you see no more air coming out. Like you've seen a lot of air coming out from this part of the slave cylinder, where we got the lines pretty well cleared out now, but we're trying to get this cleared out. So we're going to continue to do that once or twice more until we're no longer seeing bubbles. And give it a second here, because even though that popped back, you want to give it a chance for the fluid to suck down. You can see, like right here, see it's not quite. Let's actually go ahead and push on the pedal once. So I do have somebody in the car right now helping me. Now let off. Oh, okay, push on the pedal. Okay, let up. Push again. Okay, now we got it all the slack taken up. Now let off. Oh, I'm not really getting much out of it here for some reason. Okay, press on it. And pump it a couple times. And see how much movement we're already getting out of it. So that means we've got quite a bit of the air out of it already. Now go ahead and hold. All right, pump it up. Oh, see, I wasn't quite bombed out all the way. So there is a return spring that goes on here, but I don't have it on there right now. I have to double check on these how much movements are supposed to be. I know from memory on the MGB, but not so much on these because I don't see these very often. But basically you're just going to do that until you've got as much movement as you can get, or you've got a distance here that's enough, and that the clutch works smoothly. So I already did it once more and got a bunch of air out of it, so we're going to do it one more time here on camera, because I didn't have the camera on that time. We're already getting more movement out of it, so hold it. I wasn't opening this up far enough. All right, now pump it. And I got quite a bit of air out of it the one time that I had it not on the camera there. Let's see how much more movement we're getting now. And we can do this one more time just to be sure. So pump and hold. All right, pump it up. And I like to keep pressure on it until the hydraulics themselves pick up the slack, so that we don't suck any air around the piston. Not that that would necessarily happen, but it could. So I know the return spring setup that I currently have on it is what was on it when it came here. I know it's not the right setup. So we're going to start the engine here and run it through first gear and reverse gear to make sure that it goes into those gears smoothly like it should. So there you go, goes into gear just like it should. So that's how you can bleed a clutch at home on your own with no special tools. And as always, if you like what I'm doing, like, subscribe, share with your friends.